that just personally, my own self, I find the Buddhist, and as kind of channeled through the Tibetan Buddhist system, a very coherent explanation of the universe, fundamentally different from the way we think in the world, you know, the materialist view. Again, indeed different from the other views, even different from the Christian view. It's got its very own specific world view, which I find kind of workable, you know. And so what it is about the Buddhist view then, why is it I like being a Buddhist? What is it? Well, the key thing about being a Buddhist, it's about the mind, actually. I mean, you could say that Buddha is a psychologist. He didn't use that word. I mean, you know, psychology is a Greek word, but he talks about the mind. But the thing is, it's a very different, and I'd say radically different view of what the mind is. So maybe let's look at what, as far as the Buddha is concerned, what the mind is. He's radically different in terms of how he describes its function, its nature, and its potential. And so that's one point. I mean, you know, if anybody knows even one thing about Buddhism, you kind of vaguely know that he's not a creator. But I think it's really important, really interesting to look at the implications of that. And this is what I find, myself I find this quite appealing view, you know. The Buddha is not a creator. Normally if we think of religion, we think of a creator. That's the usual idea of religion is that somebody created the universe, and there's variations of this view. But broadly speaking, it seems to me if we think of religion, we think of something you're supposed to believe in, isn't it? And it's not something necessarily that you can prove. But the Buddhist approach, if he isn't a creator, we should look at what is he? He's either a person who, which is the typical view of spiritual, he had a vision, he had a dream, he had something, and then, or somebody revealed something to him, you know, and then he proceeds to write it all down. Or he made it all up, which I think is pretty shocking actually, but we tend to think that's okay when it comes to spiritual. Or the other one is, and this is where I'm really not joking when I say he's more similar to a scientist, insofar as what Buddha is said to be is a person who is presenting his own findings. So everything that is said to be Buddhism, and we need to check that it is valid, what we're hearing, that is coming from a valid source, is actually not from some vision, not something he's invented. No way is he a creator. It's actually from his own direct experience. In fact, the Buddhist approach would be if you can't finally verify it from your own direct experience, then it doesn't exist, it isn't true. And as the Dalai Lama often points out, you know, if you are following the Buddha's path and moving along, taking the instructions as he says them, if you get to a certain point and you from your own direct experience, having obeyed the instructions, done the work, followed the path, you actually come to a point where what Buddha says isn't correct, then you must reject him. So I think this approach of verification, of validating, of making it experiential, is the central point in Buddhism. And so for this reason, I know my approach, I never use the word believe. I don't say I believe in karma. I don't say I believe in reincarnation, these things that Buddha would assert. I prefer to use, and I find it much more appealing, and this is how I think of it myself, although it's rather wordy, that I'm taking Buddhism as my working hypothesis. And this really is actually the way of saying it in our contemporary world, the way to use Buddhism in your daily life, which puts the onus on us. And that's really all Buddhism is. It's a way of describing the world, eternal. The Buddha would suggest that the mind is not physical. And so then the question we ask is, well, where do I come from? Where do I come from, you know? The Buddha would say, well, basically, your consciousness, if you think of it as like a river of mental moments, this moment of your consciousness comes from a previous moment of your consciousness, like I said, a river of mental moments. The term they use in Buddhist psychology is mental continuum. This river of thoughts and feelings and emotions. And if you track it right back in an unbroken chain of mental moments, you'll get back to the first second of conception. Well, the crucial question is, what was before that? So this is where this business of karma comes in. Karma is a natural law as far as the Buddha is concerned. His observations are that it's the way things work, and it's really just the law of cause and effect. And it's really a way of talking about what karma is. It's kind of the very movement of what your mind does, all subtle levels. And that this consciousness has its own momentum, its own entity. It goes back and back before conception, before that. And what drives it is what the mind itself does. So anger and love and kindness and being good at piano, being good at killing, lust, you know, psychosis, compassion, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. They're a bunch of tendencies in our mind, basically. And the Buddha says we come into this life fully programmed with our own stuff, that no one gave it to us. We're not made this way by somebody else. It doesn't come from our genes and our DNA. is the implication of this is kind of tasty. It means that we're the boss. It means that whatever's in my mind is mine. Yes, Fred might have punched me. No one's arguing with this. Yes, Mary might have been generous to me. No one's arguing with this. But our usual materialist view would be that Mary's the main cause of my happiness and Fred is the main cause of my suffering. Whereas the Buddha would simply say they are catalysts for those experiences. They're not the main cause at all. You are the main cause of your suffering and you are the main cause of your happiness. So Buddha's whole view, like I'm saying, the experiential implication of it is that it puts us in the absolute centre of our own lives. Puts us absolutely central in terms of accountability. Not blame. We love to use the word blame, you know. Not like accountability is a better word. And the whole idea, of course, here is that if whatever's in my mind is the result of my practice, then I can change it. Yes.
I'd love to hear more about the prison project.
Yeah, well, I did, yeah, okay. In 94, when was it? 96, I was based in Santa Cruz, and I was editing a Buddhist magazine, and we got a letter from this young Mexican guy from Los Angeles. He was part of the gangs, and he was in a prison in Northern California called Pelican Bay, which had been built maybe 25, 30 years ago to take all the troublemakers off the other prison yards, because the psychologies that run the prisons in the negative sense, and all the gang activity in California is pretty stunning, you know. And that's the Asian gangs, the white gangs, the fascist gangs, the Mexican gangs, the black gangs, you know. And there's a whole world in these prisons. It's like a special country you go to. You need special passports or special rules. It's unbelievable in the prisons, this gang activity. So this young Mexican guy was 18 when he wrote. He said he'd been in prison since he was 12, in the gang since he was 11, in prison since he was 12, and then life sentences when he was 16. And now he's in this top security prison where they're kept in their cells like 23 hours a day. And this is now very common among all the systems in this country. Now it's common in many other countries. It was considered against human rights in the beginning. Because these prisons, in this prison, Pelican Bay, they're in their cells 23 hours a day. They're two-man cells usually. And they have 1 hour a day, sometimes in another cell walking up and down. But there's no light, there's no air, and they have like 10 books, the inside of a pen, because you might use the outside to stab your cellmate. They're living in their orange jumpsuits, and that's about their life, you know. Because the prison activity, the gang activity is so intense. They have their wars, they love their wars, the gangs. And in fact, you know, the gang, it's just remarkable actually. I could keep you occupied for hours with the stories. So this young man, Arturo, wrote to us. He was a southerner, and he tried to cut somebody's throat with a razor blade or something, because that's what you do. So there he is in this top security part of the prison, and he wrote a letter. And then it just grew from there, you know. Soon after that, got more letters, and by the end of the first year, there was something like, Paul was one of them. He was one of the people who wrote to us. I had 50 people writing, so it started from there basically. And then from there, we had to really focus on how to be useful, because we were endlessly getting letters. And so we grew the whole thing, and I had several staff in Australia as well. And then the main program we developed was receiving, letters from people. We were getting up 1,000 letters a month from people in prison all over the country, as well as in Australia. And then having mentors, to write to people and support them with their practice in prison. Broadly speaking, that was what we did.